Matthew 7:15-20. Watch out for false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are voracious wolves. You will recognize them by their fruit. Grapes are not gathered from thorns, or figs from thistles, are they? In the same way, every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree is not able to bear bad fruit, nor a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then, you will recognize them by their fruit. Before we begin this topic, it is important to note that believing in a false doctrine does not mean that you don't love Jesus. It means that during some time in the past, a church was infiltrated and taught lies, and these lies gained momentum and turned into doctrine. And that false doctrine has been taught to people to eventually block them or steer them away from Jesus, because he is the door. False doctrine is learning a lie and believing it, which attracts the demonic entities, and they keep you trapped. If you can admit that you can be fooled, you are off to a good start. So, please, don't get angry and block this information, or turn the video off if I speak about a doctrine you might be following. Instead, seek Jesus in prayer continuously. Look at the evidence objectively, and look at the fruit of a doctrine over time. Watch this more than once, as each unveiling is stacked upon the other. You may not agree at first, but after hearing and reading and seeing the evidence, your own personal light bulb will flick on and shine above your head. Pray for understanding and cast those demons attached to you away. They can block you from the truth. Watch my Anatomy of a Prayer series and participate in it for a stronger prayer life. False doctrines are dangerous at every level, and it is important to know where these belief structures come from, or what tree is bearing the fruit that you eat from. And evil has a pride that can't stay silent. There is an organization called the Global Voice of Jewish Community, or B'nai B'rith, which was founded in 1843, and they address themselves as Sons of the Covenant and as a fraternal order. In 1936, at the B'nai B'rith celebrations in France, they disclosed much of their rotten fruit. In this speech, they mock the public as they rejoice to their fellow brothers.
We are grateful to the Protestants for their loyalty to our wishes, although most of them are, in the sincerity of their faith, unaware of their loyalty to us. We are grateful to them for the wonderful help they are giving us in our fight against the stronghold of Christian civilization and in our preparations for the advent of our supremacy over the whole world and over the kingdom of the Gentiles. This is why we have been striving to discover the best way of shaking the Catholic Church to her very foundations. We have spread the spirit of revolt and false liberalism among the nations of the Gentiles as to persuade them away from their faith, and even to make them ashamed of professing the precepts of their religion and obeying the commandments of their church. We brought many of them to boast of being atheists, and more than that, to glory in being descendants of the ape. We have given them new theories impossible of realization, such as communism, anarchism, and socialism, without realizing that those theories are ours and that they constitute our most powerful instrument against themselves.
People who have bought Darwinism and survival of the fittest do not understand the goal of this false doctrine, and that is to divide man. In fact, survival of the fittest is not repeatable in nature, much like the entire occult teaching of evolution itself. This is a segment of a podcast called Masters Mayhan Podcast. I do not agree with their teaching of Cain or life after death. However, I do greatly appreciate their breakdown of the Satanic Empire and how they program individuals and masses, including you. And it is worth your time to invest into listening to it. This is part of segment 9, and the subject matter is apropos.
Darwin was a moron, one of the useful idiot puppets of his Luciferian masters. We have so programmed our children today that they see Darwinian concepts even where they don't exist. Science is just starting to discover that most of nature does not believe in the survival of the fittest. We are just beginning to understand that much of nature actually functions on principles of self-sacrifice and mutual aid. Almost no American student has studied the competing theories of Russian scientist Pyotr Kropotkin. Luciferians hate Russians. In Russia, Pyotr Kropotkin eloquently defeated Darwin's moronic theories with clear-cut logic and scientific observation. It does make you wonder how our theories of inhumane genocide, particularly when connected to Luciferian forced imperial colonization and gentrification, would have evolved if instead of an awkward inbred English brat going to the Galapagos Islands where reptiles do eat each other in isolation, we had been influenced by a Russian studying more intellectual animals and mammals in the tundra of Siberia. Let us go back in time and hear Dr. Kropotkin for ourselves.
Who are the fittest? Those who are continually at war with each other, or those who support one another? I saw among the semi-wild cattle and horses in Russia, among the wild mammals everywhere, the squirrels and so on, that when animals have to struggle against scarcity of food, the entire population of their species comes out of the ordeal so impoverished that progressive evolution of their species cannot be based upon Darwinian concepts of competition. In all these scenes of animal life which passed before my eyes, I saw mutual aid and mutual support carried to such extent that I saw with my own eyes that it was the true answer for their survival.
Kropotkin then illustrated so many examples of mutual aid within the animal world and cross-species. Among them, he observed beetles, crabs, termites, ants, and bees. In the mammal world, Kropotkin goes on to describe the cooperation that exists between deer, gazelles, buffaloes, antelopes, wild goats, sheep, squirrels, wolves, dogs, hares, rats, rabbits, horses, donkeys, wild boar, hippopotami, rhinoceri, seals, walruses, and sorry, Charles, monkeys. It is the example that came from the harsh Russian tundra, which contrasts sharply with Darwin's observation from his isolated island. Let's take his comments on the steppe eagle as our example. We will truncate them here for time.
The steppe eagle is a scientifically observable example of mutual aid as opposed to Darwinian survival of the fittest. One can easily observe this eagle rising high in the air for half an hour, making wide circles in silence, when at once its piercing voice is heard. Its cry is soon answered by another eagle, which will approach it, followed by a third, a fourth, and so on, till 9 or 10 eagles come together and soon descend together. If one will go to the ground beyond where he saw the eagles flying, he will discover that they have gathered around the corpse of an animal. The old birds, which as a rule begin the meal first, such are their rules of propriety, will when finished sit upon the haystacks of the neighborhood and keep watch to protect the younger ones from any intruder, while the younger ones finish their meal, surrounded by bands of waiting crows who get the last meal.
In other words, they take turns watching out for each other. From this, Kropotkin intelligently reasoned that these eagles hunt together. When they are all high up in the sky, they each take a separate airspace. 10 eagles hunting together can scan an area of 25 miles square. The moment anyone discovers something, they call to the others who celebrate the meal as a team. This is not survival of the fittest, not by any made-up definition of the same. Taking turns eating and giving due deference to their elder birds flies in the exact opposite direction of Darwin's conclusions. His observations prove that competition, survival of the fittest as a mark of evolution, weakened rather than strengthened individual species. He said,
To admit a pitiless inner war for life within each species, and to see that war the condition of Darwinian progress, was to admit something which is not proven, and also lacks confirmation from direct scientific observation. Happily, competition for survival is not the rule, either in the animal world or among mankind. We can see that it is limited among animals to exceptional periods. Better conditions are created by the elimination of competition through mutual aid and mutual support. In the great struggle for life, the greatest possible fullness and intensity of life with the least waste of energy, true natural selection continually seeks out ways precisely for avoiding competition as much as possible. We observe that ants combine in nests and into nations. They pile up their stores, they join together their food gathering, and thus avoid competition. We can see that so-called natural selection picks out the ant family, which knows best how to avoid competing with each other. Many birds in Siberia slowly move southwards as the winter comes and gather in numberless societies, undertake long journeys together to avoid competition. Many rodents fall asleep when the time comes that competition would set in, while other rodents store food for the winter and gather in large villages for obtaining the necessary protection when at work. The reindeer, when the lichens are dry in the interior of the continent, migrate towards the sea together. Buffaloes cross an immense continent in order to find plenty of food in herds for support. And the beavers, when they grow numerous on a river, divide into two parties, and the old ones down the river, while the young ones up the river, to avoid competition between them. This is observable time and time again in nature.
But how does it translate to humanity? He went on.
It is evident that life in human societies would be utterly impossible without a corresponding development of social feelings, and especially of a certain collective sense of justice growing to become a habit. If every individual were constantly abusing his personal advantages without the others interfering in favor of the wronged, no human society would be possible. Love, sympathy, and self-sacrifice play an immense part of the progressive development of our human feelings. It is the recognition of mutual aid of the close dependency of everyone's happiness upon the happiness of all, and of the sense of justice or equity, which brings the individual to consider the rights of every other individual as equal to his own. Upon this broad and necessary foundation, the still higher moral feelings of man are developed, and feelings of justice develop, more or less, with all gregarious animals. For example, whatever the distance from which the swallows or the cranes come, each one returns to the nest it had built and repaired the previous year. If a lazy sparrow intends appropriating the nest which a comrade is building, or even steals from it a few sprays of straw, the larger group will intervene against their lazy comrade. And it is evident that without such interference, being no rule, no nesting associations of birds could exist. Separate groups of penguins have separate resting places and separate fishing abodes, which the whole helps maintain.
Back to the present. Only recently have scientists discovered that plants behave in the same way. Using what they are dubbing the Wood Wide Web, plants share information with other plants through touching roots. If one plant senses danger or is in fact dying, it will warn the others to prepare and have been observed sending its nutrients to another in order to save it. This is not survival of the fittest, but is literally self-sacrifice. The closest concept that exists anywhere to this type of thing is Christianity, where we have been taught that the Good Shepherd gives his life for the sheep, and I am the true vine, and ye are the branches. How did Christ know these profound things?
After hearing this audio once, you know it is the truth. People are manipulated by Darwin's theories through repetition. This is because the satanic people run our schools. If you're still not convinced that the synagogue of Satan controls everything around us, what about the 6 million Jews in peril 20 years before World War II?
Hiya. Here's 10 newspapers where these Jews are pushing this 6 million figure between the years of 1915 and 1938. The first newspaper is The Sun of New York. New York, June the 6th, 1915. That is The Sun. It's the first page of the 5th section that I want. And there we go. The Sun. It's a bit ripped along there, so it'll come off a bit. The 5th section. This is the front page. And the article is called Horrors Worse than Kishinev, Charged Against Russia Today. And there's the big article. Takes up most of the page. So go in, yeah, go. Since the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, the Jewish people have had no darker page in their history than that which the Russian government is writing today. 6 million Jews, one half of the Jewish people throughout the world, are being persecuted, hounded, humiliated, tortured, starved. Thousands of them have been slaughtered. Hundreds of thousands of Jews, old men, women and children, are being driven mercilessly from town to town. There it is, people. 6 million Jews. One half of the Jewish people throughout the world are being persecuted, hounded, humiliated, tortured and starved. As I go along here, support here as well. Dear brethren, have mercy on the 6 million Jews in Russia and take our part. Again, 6 million Jews in Russia. 6 million. This is in an article entitled Horrors Worse in Kishinev, Charged Against Russia Today. That's in the Sun of New York, Sunday, June the 6th, 1915. This is 18 years before Hitler ever set foot in the government. 18 years. This is the next newspaper. This is New York Times again. It's from 1918. There it is, the New York Times, October the 18th, 1918. It's page 12 that I want. There we go, page 12. Page 12, the New York Times, October the 18th, 1918, and the article is called $1 billion Fund to Rebuild Jewry. There it is. 6 million souls will need help to resume normal life when war is ended. 6 million souls. As I go down the article here, there's again, 6 million Jews need help. 6 million. 6 million Jews need help. That's in an article called $1 billion Fund to Rebuild Jewry. That is in the New York Times, October the 18th, 1918. Here's the next newspaper. This is New York Times again. The New York Times, September the 8th, 1919. It's page 6 that I want. There we go. Page 6. Page 6. The New York Times, September the 8th, 1919. And the article is called Ukrainian Jews Aim to Stop Pogroms. Mass meeting hears that 127,000 Jews have been killed and 6 million are in peril. 6 million. As I go down the article, there it is. We come out now before the world with a determined slogan, "Those pogroms must stop," said the President in his annual message. It is only a question of holding these facts continually before the civilized world. We must not permit the world to slumber. This fact that the population of 6 million souls in Ukraine and in Poland have received notice through action and by word that they are going to be completely exterminated. You literally cannot make this up. 6 million souls completely exterminated. 6 million. That is an article called Ukrainian Jews Aim to Stop Pogroms in the New York Times, September the 8th, 1919. This is 13 and a half years before Hitler come to power. This is the next newspaper. This is the New York Times again. The New York Times, the date, November the 12th, 1919. It's page 7 that I want on here. There you go. Page 7 in the New York Times, November the 12th, 1919. The article is called Tells Sad Plight of Jews. Felix M. Warburg says they were the worst sufferers in the war. There it is here. The successive blows of contending armies have all but broken the back of European Jewry, he said, and have reduced to tragically unbelievable poverty, starvation and disease about 6 million souls, or half the Jewish population of the earth. 6 million. 6 million souls, or half the Jewish population of the earth. I'll go further down the article so you can read the rest of it. There is again, people. Unbelievable poverty, starvation and disease. About 6 million souls, or half the Jewish population of the earth. An article entitled Tell Sad Plight of Jews in the New York Times, November the 12th, 1919. This is the next newspaper. It's the Atlanta Constitution from 1920. February 23rd, 1920. The article's on the front page here. It's called $50,000 raised in city to save suffering Jews. And it goes along the bottom. Continued on page 3, column 4. So I'll go to page 3. There we go. Constitution Atlanta, February 23rd, 1920. There it is. $50,000 raised to save suffering Jews. Continued from first page. I'll go down. He called upon the Atlanta Jews to arise to the occasion and to contribute to the emergency fund in order that the lives of 6 millions of Jewish people may be saved. 6 millions of Jewish people may be saved. I'll go further down. Rabbi Mark speaks. Rabbi Marx made an eloquent plea for generous responses to the call of the representatives of the Jewish Relief Fund. He drew a graphic picture of the starvation and suffering of the 6 million Jews who live in Eastern Europe and Palestine. 6 million Jews. Thousands upon thousands of our people have died of starvation and pestilence, and thousands more will die, he said. There it is, people. 6 million Jews. In an article entitled $50,000 raised to save suffering Jews in the Constitution of Atlanta, February 23rd, 1920. This is the next newspaper. This is the New York Times. This is from 1920. There we go. The New York Times. The date, Friday, May the 7th, 1920. It's page 11 that I want. There we go. Page 11. Page 11. And the article is called "The Jewish War Aid Gets $100,000 Gift." There it is. The fund for Jewish war sufferers in Central and Eastern Europe, where 6 millions face horrifying conditions of famine, disease and death, was enriched yesterday by a contribution of $100,000 from Nathan Strauss. Where 6 millions face horrifying conditions of famine, disease and death. 6 millions face horrifying conditions of famine, disease and death. I'll just go down the rest of the article if anybody wants to read it. There's an article called "Jewish War Aid Gets $100,000 Gift" in the New York Times, Friday, May the 7th, 1920. Here's the New York Times again. This is 1921. There you go. New York Times, Wednesday, July the 20th, 1921. It's page 2 that I want. There we go. Page 2. Page 2. New York Times, July 20th, 1921. And the article is called "Begs America, Save 6 Million in Russia. Massacre Threatens All Jews as Soviet Power Wanes, Declares Kreinin, Coming Here for Aid." Look at that. Russia's 6 million Jews are facing extermination by massacre. As the famine is spreading, the counter-revolutionary movement is gaining, and the Soviets' control is waning. Now this is one of the biggest articles of the lot. This is 1921, 12 years before Adolf Hitler ever set foot in the government. Look at that. Russia's 6 million Jews are facing extermination by massacre. That's an article entitled "Begs America, Save 6 Million in Russia" on page 2 in the New York Times, Wednesday, July 20th, 1921. This is the Gazette of Montreal. This is 1931. The Gazette, Montreal, Tuesday, December the 29th, 1931. This is over a year before Hitler come to power. The Gazette, it's page 6 that I want. There we go. Page 6. Page 6. The Gazette, Montreal, December the 29th, 1931. And the article pretty much speaks up for itself. 6 million Jews face starvation. 6 million. Bad conditions in southeastern Europe reported by Rabbi Wise. Fears crisis at hand. 6 million Jews in Eastern Europe face starvation, and even worse during the coming winter. 6 million Jews. I'll give you a look at the rest of the article. The article is called 6 Million Jews Face Starvation. The Gazette of Montreal, December the 29th, 1931. 1.5 years before Adolf Hitler ever set foot in the government. This is the next newspaper. This is New York Times again. There we go. New York Times. But this is dated 1936. Sunday, May the 31st, 1936. This does not say the 6 million Jews, but it does say Holocaust. New York Times. It's page 14 that I want. There we go. Page 14. The New York Times, May the 31st, 1936. And the article is called Americans Appeal for Jewish Refuge. It's quite a big article. But it's along here. Yeah. The petition, in expressing the opinion of enlightened Christian leadership in the United States favouring a larger Jewish immigration into Palestine, stressed the intolerable sufferings of the millions of Jews in the European Holocaust. The European Holocaust in 1936, before the Second World War even started. You go up here, and there it is again. Great Britain has it within her power to throw open the gates of Palestine and let in the victimised and persecuted Jews escaping from the European Holocaust. The European Holocaust in 1936, 3.5 years before the Second World War ever even started. That's in an article entitled Americans Appeal for Jewish Refuge, the New York Times, May the 31st, 1936. Here's the next newspaper. This is New York Times again. New York Times. This is dated February the 23rd, 1938. This is before the Second World War started. About a year and a half. The New York Times. It's page 23 that I want. There you go. Page 23. The New York Times, February 23rd, 1938. And the article is called Jewish Teachers Chided by Isaacs. I'll go along the bottom. And it is a Jewish tragedy pictured. A depressing picture of 6 million Jews in Central Europe deprived of protection or economical opportunities, slowly dying of starvation, all hope gone, was presented to the teachers by Jacob Tarshish. The Jewish tragedy started when Hitler came into power in 1933. There it is again, people. 6 million Jews in Central Europe, slowly dying of starvation. 6 million. This is in 1938. Jewish teachers chided by Isaacs. New York Times, February 23rd, 1938. A year and a half before the Second World War even started.
This is an audio recording from 2006 between Pastor James Wickstrom and Rabbi Abraham Finkelstein, and I believe that this audio was done purposely, and both men are part of the Freemasons. To some, that might discredit the audio, but if you are aware of the Masonic tactics in the first video of this series, it checks those boxes, and it's not a random podcast, but a Turner Network radio show. Please keep in mind that Pastor Wickstrom teaches the Sethite view of Scripture, which is a recent interpretation of Scripture to hide the Nephilim, who are above the synagogue of Satan, and this channel does not share Pastor Wickstrom's Scripture interpretations. This audio is here to show you the synagogue of Satan only. I've edited the audio down significantly from an hour program. However, the whole audio can be listened to from the library, if you deem it necessary.
I have a guest by the name of Rabbi A.B. Finkelstein. He's off the east coast of the United States, who's going to be joining me tonight, and we're going to be talking about authenticity of things in the world. Rabbi A.B. Finkelstein, as I said, a rabbi off the east coast of the United States. Are you there with me tonight?
Hello, I am here.
And I know we've never met, but I do have some very interesting questions for you. I think questions that I want to give you the opportunity to answer to, because there's a lot of rumors and conjecture that's taking place across this country relating to the Jewish population, okay? You see, there's a big topic that's going around on this 6 million Holocaust that took place during World War II of the Jews at Buchenwald, Auschwitz, and different places. A lot of information has come out here, Rabbi Finkelstein, that it's all myth and it's all conjecture. Could I have your view on this?
Well, everybody knows that the Jews never told a lie in the history of the world. However, whether it's 6 million or 600,000 or 60,000, it's just a number.
Oh, it's just a number, but the thing that I want to get to you at is that, you know, the 1934 World Encyclopedia stated that there was only 3.5 million Jews in all of Europe. How did 3.5 million Jews populate themselves to 6 million? This is the question I'd like answered.
Well, it's certainly a good question, there's no doubt about it. But the number, numbers, what can I say about numbers? The important thing is that Jews have always been persecuted all throughout the history of the world forever and still are.
Well, the reason they're persecuted is because they're thieves, liars, and murderers, just like it's stated in the book of John 8:44. Yet you're
Bible stuff.
You're a lying Jew is what you are.
You could say that, but even when we lie, we tell the truth.
Rabbi Finkelstein, a goyim is any person who isn't a Jew. A goyim is classified as cattle or an animal. Is this correct?
Well, they are cattle, because we're the chosen people.
All of you Jews, the descendants of Cain, are going to perish for the evil that you have done in this world. You are the destroyers and the incineraries of the world, are you not?
I'll agree with that.
Is that all wars have been created by Jewry. They've been all set up to gain, as a monetary gain. Wouldn't you agree?
It's the greatest game in the world to make some shekels.
Now, let me ask you this. You know, there's so much things being talked about with George Bush in the White House. Let me have your opinion, first of all, about George Bush in the White House.
He's a good goyim.
He's a good goyim.
He's a good boy. He takes his orders from Ariel over there, and he tells them what to do, and he does it like a good goyim.
Would you agree that when the Balfour Declaration was signed in England and the Jews were taken to Palestine, the land of Palestine, would you agree or disagree that there's actually more killing and there's been as much slaughter in Palestine by the Jews slaughtering and killing the Palestinians as there are of the Iraqi people being butchered in the last 12 years?
Well, who counts? But once in a while you gotta thin out the herd. When you own the herd, you gotta thin out the herd.
I see. That's the philosophy of making money and staying alive and staying ahead. Is this right?
Well, you take that Iraq business over there. We got the white goyim fighting the Arab goyim, and they're killing each other, and we're making a lot of money, and we get the oil, and we get the interest. The most important thing is the interest on all the shekels that we loan both sides.
You mean usury?
That's right. You call it usury.
You know, there's a book out that you read, Rabbi Finkelstein, called the Talmud. Now, the Talmud refers to Christ as his mother was a whore, and he was a bastardized son of a Roman soldier. Is this what's being taught in the synagogues?
Well, every good Jew knows that.
But you see, the reason that I wanted to ask you this is that, you know, you just said a little while ago that he was a Jew. And now you say every Jew knows that he was the son of a Roman soldier and that his mother was a prostitute.
Well, that was a long time ago. Who knows what was said back then?
The 7 Jew banking families that took over control of the money in America in 1913 was the Rothschilds of London, Israel Schiff of Italy, Kuhn and Loeb of Germany, the Warburgs of Hamburg, Lehman Brothers of New York, Goldman Sachs of New York, and the Rockefellers of New York. A lot of people, they don't realize and know that these 7 Jewish families actually control all the money and have controlled the money in this country since 1913. I know you're aware of this.
Right.
Now, in doing so, I mean, that makes a pretty big purse, doesn't it?
Listen, you know, the goyim are the schleppers. You know, they do all the work. That's what they want to do. They want to work. They always want jobs, so we give them jobs to work. The Jews don't work.
What is the greatest fear that the Jews in mass are facing on the East Coast?
Well, the worst thing is if we hang around. Our old buddy up there in the Federal Reserve, Allen, he's going to pull the plug on this U.S. dollar. And we want to make sure that we're into Swiss francs or into euros or Japanese yen or something before that happens. We'll get the call from the Kahilla. We're liquidating now, little by little. A couple of other goyim that they're good, bought and paid for Shabbos goy. The Bill Gates fellow from the computer place, and the Warren Buffett. Both of them, they got out of U.S. dollars about a year ago or so. We told them, you know, to liquidate, and but we're still hanging on there. So we made a little extra interest since they were out of the market. They got a lot of shekels themselves.
I see where you Jews have finally taken over the National Rifle Association. A Jewess by the name of Sandra Froman is now president of the National Rifle Association.
Well, yeah, but we took over the NRA a long time ago. Charlton Heston, it's not known so much, but yeah, he's a nice Jewish boy. We let him play Moses in the movies back in the 50s. We took the NRA over long ago. All the organizations out there, the Jew controls it. Everybody knows that.
You know, I've read in your Talmud where it says that if you're to have any opposition, you will control that opposition.
Well, of course. The smartest thing is to own both sides of every game. That way you know the outcome. We own the Republicans, we own the Democrats. We got a lot of good Jewish boys on both of them, and the rest of them are good, bought and paid for Shabbos goy, and we throw a few shekels into their campaign contributions that we give them, and our Jewish lobby in Israel, and they take the money and they do what we want so that we can make some shekels. If nobody stops it, who's to say we shouldn't be doing it? Don't you wish you could do it?
You know, I had a conversation here not long ago with an individual, and I got into the feminist homosexual agenda in the United States, and I told them that actually the sexist homosexual agenda was actually created and funded by Jewry, by the Jews of the United States. Well, you want to discuss on that?
Yeah, we got that going back in the early 1900s. The women's rights movement. We started off. See, when you're gonna have a game and you got a bigger goal, you can't go in like a Sherman tank going through something. You gotta start a little small. And so we said, hey, how about you get equal pay for equal work? And women have the right to vote. And everybody bought into that. And we started with the women because it's hard to get the men. The women are the weakest sex, as we know from that old Adam and Eve story of yours. But at any rate, we got the women going. And now look at all the women. Most all of them around the world, especially here in America, they got short hair. They got a schwarzer for a boyfriend. They got a lesbian lover. They're married by the time they're 40, but then they can't have too many little children themselves because they've already ruined those years chasing the almighty gold, the dollar, the shekel, and so they're going to wind up a bunch of old maids because nobody wants them. A lot of people here in America, they still keep screaming about these 55 guys that they say formed the country a couple of hundred years ago. But the bottom line is that the Jews formed the country. We came over here. 1492 was that terrible year that we got kicked out of Spain. And Columbus, who was a Jew, he found it out to take us over here. We were going to set up in Rio, and then we decided to go to New York, because New York has a little bit better weather, not so many mosquitoes. It was a little bit better. So we set up in New York, and we make the money.
You know, you state, we got $300 billion tied up in Iraq with interest. And what's 1,700 to 3,000 dead bodies compared to how much money you made?
Well, but you got to thin out the herd once in a while. Otherwise, the herds get too big. And if the herds get too big, they eat up all the resources. So you got to thin out the herd once in a while. We call it a theater of war because it's amusing to us Jews to see our two biggest enemies, the white race and the Arab race, the seed of the woman. It's amusing to us to see them kill each other, and we make a lot of money off it. Believe me, I've had a lot of laughs at the synagogue with them.
Actually, it was Jews who financed the Bolsheviks' Jew Communist Revolution against the Tsar. Would you comment on that?
Well, it was really the Rothschild family that financed it because they got all the shekels. Boy, let me tell you, they got the shekels. When the old man died in 1812, he owned half of all the known wealth in the world. Oy vey! The rest of us got to chop up the rest of it. But anyway, we started the Bolshevik Revolution there because you might as well start with taking over the biggest country in the world, which was Russia. And we had the help to murder the Tsar from his cousins, the Kaiser, and the King and Queen of England, and so they helped us and they gave us all the inside information that we needed to take the country over. And but we drained that country pretty well. There's not a lot left. We've been doing real good here in America for a long time, but it's time to do something else. So we're going to build up China and India, and we'll just let America sink into the desert. Because no one really cares about America anymore. You know, there's not a lot of shekels to be made anymore. You know, as they say, you can't get blood out of a stone, and we've gotten as much blood out of this stone as we're going to get.
And there's a large percentage of Jews in this country who really don't know what's going on either. They're going to be cannon fodder too, aren't they?
There's a few at the bottom that don't go to the synagogue and they don't know, but they know. They hear that, you know, at parties we discuss it, you know, how we're going to wipe out the white race and wipe out the Arab race, actually let them wipe out each other and make a lot of money. That's pretty smart. You know, us Jews, we're pretty smart guys. I know eventually we'll get all the rest of the countries around the world, they'll wipe each other out because us Jews, we're special. We're the chosen people, and we're the smartest people in the world, and we have always said down through the ages, we want a world of our own, and we're going to get it, and there's nothing any of the Goyim cattle are going to do to stop it.
The Jews had control of the money, but they didn't have control or a good foothold in Washington, D.C., did they?
No, we had control since the Civil War. Rothschild, he backed both sides of the Civil War, and when the smoke cleared, he was getting shekels from both of them, lots of interest. They're never going to be able to pay back the war debt. We really controlled it then. Basically, what we've been doing is consolidating.
And we know that there's a massive collision that's going to take place between two forces, don't we?
Well, that's what your book says. Our book says that we're going to take over the world.
Well, I look at you
doing a pretty good job right now.
Yeah, Yes, you've done a pretty good job, but you know there's quite an awakening coming. And my father, who's not your father, my father Yahweh, who isn't your father, of course your father is talked about by my father in John 8:44, stating that your father was Satan and that you're the descendant of Cain, who was the first murderer. And you know that's true because you teach it in your synagogue.
Oh, that's true, but it's not for you Goyim to know. But right now it's too late. It's over for you white race. So that's why I'm speaking so honestly here, to bring it out into the open so that you can see it for what it is. You've been teaching the people real good, but they don't wake up, do they? You don't get a lot of followers, do they? Because you know why? They're scared of us Jews, because they don't want to be called anti-Semites, and they believe that we're the chosen people, and so that's why we can do whatever we want to do, and we can get away with it because the white men are cowards. And we go to the synagogue all the time and have some Manischewitz and dance the Hava Nagila.
You know, it's interesting. I've told people for years and years, it's not that you Jews are hiding anything. You're coming right out on television, in the newspapers, on the radio, and you're telling the people exactly what you're going to do before you do it, and they're like they're brain dead.
Well, we did a good job with the public school system. We got you to put all of your children in there. You notice that the Jew doesn't put his children in there. They go to the Hebrew Academy where we teach them the real things, and then they go to the synagogue and they learn the real important things. But we send your kids to the public school. We even have you tax yourself from your property so that you never own your property. And so if you don't make your property tax, we're going to take your property. You can bet on that. And we have you put your kid in a 12-year babysitting is about all it does, because you don't learn anything. And then by that time, the kids, they get to be teenagers, and then we give them the music. Not that we really want to call it music, because, oy vey, that's not music. But they listen to that, and then they want to do what they want to do, and so we sell them drugs, and we make a lot of money off your children. Your children from cradle to grave. All we do is make money off of them. Your cattle, your goyim, the human cattle, mazel tov.
But I also know the bloodletting. I know that on your Passover, which isn't mine, that a lot of little children do disappear, and I do know that, and I know a lot of police departments and agencies have been informed, but you're very open. You're very open tonight. I'm very surprised that you're talking about the bloodletting of the little children, that you put their blood in the matzvah balls, and that you eat it on sacrifice on Passover.
Well, there was a Goyim that wrote a book about it back in the 30s. I forget his name at the moment. Anyway, he wrote the book. People didn't buy the book. People don't want to listen. We've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years, since down to Adam's time. We take the children of our enemy, which is the white race, and we bring them to the basements in the synagogues, where we drain the blood and watch them die there. It's very similar to how we do the sacrifices that we do with the kosher butchering, and so we do that, and then we mix it with the Passover bread, and so we eat the blood of our enemies. And the bodies, we're not cannibals, so what we do is we take those, because we can make some shekels, and we give them to the slaughterhouses, and those are pounds and pounds and pounds of meat that we grind up in the sausage and the hamburger, and that's why we made those the most popular thing, sausage for breakfast and hamburger for lunch. And so all the Goyim out here are really eating their children. And even when we say this outright and tell you people, you don't believe it. So that's your problem.
How did you Jews ever get control of the Christian churches in this country?
You know, our father Lucifer, the number one thing of all the organizations out there on the earth that we would want to infiltrate and take over of you Goyim, obviously would be the churches. So we attacked them first, and we attacked them most. And we infiltrated the Catholic Church right from the very beginning. Why do you think the Pope and all the cardinals and the bishops wear a yarmulke? The white race never figures this out. And so then we took all your books that had all your scriptures in there, and we burned them. And then we wrote them in Latin so that you couldn't understand them. But we understood Latin because we're Jews and we're smart and we're educated. But you, goyim out there, you never teach yourself. You don't self-teach. You're always looking for somebody else to do it for you. So you wind up being schleppers all your life. And so anyway, 1,000 years later, when a bunch of the white race started to wake up in Europe, and they started to leave the Catholic Church, it was a terrible time because we weren't making as many shekels as we used to. So we had to put a stop to it. So the kings that we had in our hip pocket, just like the politicians of Washington, D.C. today, we paid them off to get you declared heretics so that they would crucify you and kill you. But there was too many of you, and the West was opening up, where the Jews opened up New York and Rio, and everybody started going west to the Americas. And so we had to come up with a plan B. And plan B, we formed the Jesuits. It was a nice boy, Ignatius Loyola, that he started the Jesuits. And so they decided to infiltrate all the Protestant churches out there. And as always, us Jews work our way to the top. And then we take over the money line, the shekel line, the most important line, the lifeline, the gold. And so we took that over. And so slowly but surely we teach the teachings, change them a little bit to where it's all run by the Catholic Church again. The Mother Church, it's your mother, but the Father Church is the synagogues in Israel and in the synagogues in New York.
The revelations from this audio sound extraordinary, but there are more revelations to come from others further on in this video. Martin Luther. According to the records of the B'nai B'rith, Luther was initially influenced and financed by the Synagogue of Satan conspirators, but later discovered and exposed their deception.
Martin Luther yielded to the influence of his Jewish friends unknowingly, and again by Jewish authority and with Jewish finance. His plot against the Catholic Church met with success, but unfortunately he discovered the deception and became a threat to us. So we disposed of him as we have of so many others who dare to oppose us.
The Jews and Their Lies by Dr. Martin Luther. Warning Against the Jews by Martin Luther. Luther was an Augustinian monk of the strict observance in a German monastery, a member of Martin Luther's order appointed, in accordance with the rule of St. Augustine, to read while other monks eat, in order that the monks may focus upon their spiritual hunger for the Word of God, as well as their physical hunger. Attempts to head off laxity in the order led to the establishment of the observant wing to which Luther belonged, by virtue of joining the Erfurt House. His fellow German Augustinians showed sympathy in 1518 with Luther's theological stand, but in that same year his Augustinian superior, Staupitz, released him from his monk's vows. Johann von Staupitz, Vicar General of the Augustinian Order, monk, spiritual advisor, Staupitz was the senior figure in Luther's Augustinian Order in Germany, and the leading light in the strict or observant wing of it. Luther frequently praised the spiritual comforts Staupitz had given him, though the older man did not join Luther's movement. John Osborne, Luther, Royal National Theatre. Strict observance was the name given by Baron von Hund, a German Templar, to the 33rd degree of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, 1743. Baron von Hund said he had been commissioned to set up lodges of strict observance in Germany and to promulgate true Freemasonry under a system known as strict observance. Because of the oath of the apprentice Mason included a vow of absolute obedience to unknown superiors. The idea of a chivalric order, strict obedience, and a secret Grand Master must have had great appeal in Germany, because over the next 20 years, the new order promoted by von Hund spread like wildfire and extended from Germany to almost every country of the continental Europe. The text of the Protocols of Sion ends with a single statement, signed by the representatives of Sion of the 33rd degree. and the 33rd degree in Freemasonry is that of the so-called strict observance, the system of Freemasonry introduced by Baron von Hund at the behest of his unknown superiors, one of whom appears to have been Charles Radcliffe, Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Luther's personal seal was the Rosicrucian rose symbolizing the lost tribes of Israel. The Rosicrucian rose is a 5-petaled rose that can be seen on Martin Luther's seal, which hides the pentagram, a symbol that represented the goddess Astaroth. In regards to Luther, I could go on with this for what would be another hour of exposure, so I recommend that you visit this website to do your own deep dive into Martin Luther on your own time. False doctrines or misleading interpretations of Scripture have been around for thousands of years. Judas Iscariot betrayed Jesus because of a false doctrine. Judas believed that Jesus would be a great general and lead the Hebrews out of their turmoil by defeating the Romans, because this was taught to him by the preachers of that time. God's way was far better, encompassing everyone and freeing us from the doom that sin gave us. The religious interpretations of the preachers of that time led all those who were religious to their doom, holding to a belief structure despite the evidence to the contrary. The Pharisees were the majority and were not Levites whom God appointed. The Pharisees never consulted God, but trusted in themselves and their interpretation. If Jesus couldn't get Judas to turn from a false doctrine, please don't be so proud to think that you are impervious from being fooled. Much of today's false doctrines are credited to the westernized evangelical church through the influence of Martin Luther and the doctrines of John Calvin, John Nelson Darby, and Scofield, occult society members sent out to deceive nations. If you're finding this helpful, please share this video. Send this to the people you care for and the people you pray for and your favorite podcasters and teachers. This video will go nowhere if you don't.